My parents let my sister move into my house, then tried to declare it family property and told me to leave. Can you imagine walking into your own home, only to find your parents casually lounging on your couch, and then having them inform you that they've moved in? Oh, and by the way, your golden child sister is getting your guest room, because you weren't using it. It sounds like a bad sitcom, right? But for me, it was a waking nightmare, a nightmare I was quietly preparing to end. When I finally got the keys to my first house, I didn't throw a party. I didn't post some cheesy selfie on the porch with a "look who made it" caption. No. I just stood in the empty living room for a moment, and I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding since I was 15. No one ever told me silence could sound like this. Not like the silence back home, the kind that always followed my mom saying, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Or after my dad would mumble, "We're doing the best we can," which usually meant, "We're buying your sister another car and pretending you're invisible." This silence, though? This felt earned. The house was small, yeah. A two-bed fixer-upper with a creaky fence and a mailbox that leaned like it was tired of standing. But it was mine. Every scraped penny, every overtime shift, every late-night burrito that pulled double duty as breakfast, all of it led me right here. And I didn't owe anyone a single explanation. Not to my mom, who once called my auto upholstery job a weird phase with glue and pleather. Not to my dad, who chuckled when I said I was opening my own detailing bay and asked, "You mean, like, car seats?" Not even to my golden sister, Natalie, who probably thought I still lived in a van behind a Taco Bell. It's funny. Growing up, I wasn't rebellious. I was just tired. Tired of being the family ghost. I didn't storm out at 18. I didn't scream, "You'll regret this." No. I just packed a duffel bag, left a note that said, "Thanks for the roof," and vanished from their dinner table like I'd never even mattered in the first place. Years passed. I worked. I saved. I stitched, stapled, patched, and scrubbed. Not just car interiors, but parts of myself I didn't even know were cracked. That lonely kind of healing. The kind with zero applause. And now here I was, keys in hand, standing on the other side of a life they never thought I'd build. My realtor asked, "Want to do a video tour?" I just laughed and said, "No, I want the first person who walks in here to be me." And I meant it. The house had quirks, sure. The bathroom door stuck if you shut it too hard. The fridge made a noise like it was preparing for liftoff every 3 hours. And the guest bedroom? More like a "don't breathe near the wall or it'll fall" room. But it was mine. I even bought a lawn flamingo for the front yard. His name was Gary. He leaned a bit, like the mailbox. They were both survivors. We got along. By week 3, I'd settled into the rhythm. Work during the day, tinker with the place at night, pass out to the hum of the ceiling fan that sometimes spun slower than it should. And every night, I locked my doors. All 3 of them. Just in case the past ever came knocking. So, when I pulled into my driveway late on a Thursday, Chinese takeout in one hand, toolbox in the other, I wasn't expecting anything weird. Until I noticed something off. Gary was missing. At first, I thought maybe he blew over. The wind had been crazy earlier. But no, he wasn't anywhere. Not behind the bushes, not by the porch. I frowned, climbed the steps, and turned my key. The door creaked open. And I froze. There. On my couch. The couch I had dragged up the stairs alone, like a lunatic, sat 2 people I hadn't seen in over a year. My parents. Just sitting there, like they owned the place. My dad had his shoes off. Mom was sipping tea. My tea. From the mug that said "property of the guy who pays the mortgage." I stood there for a second, not moving. Mom smiled first. "Oh, good. You're home. We figured you wouldn't mind." I blinked. Mind what? She gestured around like she was giving a tour, talking about making this a family property now. Family property. Like I was supposed to just nod and say, "Oh, yeah. Let's all pretend you never treated me like a busted zipper for 20 years. I slowly set the takeout on the counter and said, as calmly as humanly possible, "You're right. I don't mind. And that's when Mom's smile faltered. Just slightly. Because what I did next made her face turn absolutely pale. You're right. I don't mind, I said it casually, almost like I was complimenting the weather. But under the surface, my brain was sprinting laps, trying to figure out how we'd gone from estranged to surprised squatters. Mom looked satisfied, like she'd won something. Dad just nodded and said, "Knew you'd understand. You always were the calm one, right?" Calm. That's what you call it when someone's ignored so thoroughly they forget what it feels like to raise their voice. I set my keys on the counter like nothing was wrong. I even pulled out the soy sauce packets from the takeout bag and laid them neatly in a row, just to keep my hands busy. "So," I said, "how long have you been visiting?" "Oh, not visiting," Mom corrected quickly. "We moved in yesterday." I blinked. "Moved in?" "Well, we didn't think you'd mind," she repeated, like that was a legal clause. "It's such a lovely space, and your sister needed somewhere quiet to study for her realtor exam, so we offered her your old room." "You weren't using it." I turned slowly. "Wait, Natalie's here?" "Not right now," Dad said, waving his hand. "She's with her boyfriend, but her stuff's in the room. The pink suitcase and the ring light." Of course. I had wondered what that ring light was doing in there. "Just until she passes the test," Mom added. "And then probably a little longer, depending on her listings." I stared at them both. "So, just to clarify," I said. "You moved yourselves in. You moved Natalie in. You claimed my guest room, rearranged my furniture, and decided to call this a family property, and all without telling me?" Mom gave me that classic, patient smile she always used when I was 6 and asking why she forgot my birthday. "You're being dramatic," she said lightly. "This is your home, but we're a family, so it's our home, too." I wish I could say I was shocked, but this was the same woman who once said I was too quiet to live alone and tried to sign me up for community college classes without asking. The same dad who lent my childhood bike to a neighbor's kid and said, "You weren't using it." That line was apparently their family motto. I sat on the edge of the armrest and took a deep breath. "So, where are you guys sleeping?" "Oh, we've taken the master," Mom said, sipping her tea. "You work such early hours, we figured you'd want the smaller room near the garage. Less noise, right?" "How thoughtful," I said. They completely missed the sarcasm. "Of course," Dad added. "You needed the company." This place was feeling too sterile. Sterile, bro? I had hung up one plant, bought a Target lamp, and played lo-fi jazz in the evenings. It was peaceful, not a surgical unit. I stood and walked to the fridge, needing a break from the sheer audacity. They had restocked it with almond milk, off-brand turkey slices, and a whole box of frozen diet meals. The kind Mom always claimed I should try sometime. "Why now?" I asked flatly. After all these years of silence, Mom gave me the kicker. "Because you finally settled. You're stable. We knew you'd be ready for us." Like I was a hotel that just passed inspection. "You never reached out when I moved," I said. "Never called. Not even when I posted the deed paperwork." "Oh, that," she said, waving it off. "We figured you'd contact us when you were ready." Translation: we ignored you until you had something we wanted. Still, I nodded slowly. Makes sense. I think my calm was unnerving them. They expected yelling. A meltdown. Some dramatic "how could you?" But I'd lived with that brand of selfishness long enough to know better. You don't waste fire on people made of smoke. Instead, I quietly opened the drawer, pulled out a notepad, and scribbled something. "What's that?" Dad asked. "Just a list," I said. "Of what needs to be replaced." "Replaced?" "Oh, yeah," I smiled. "Some furniture's going to have to go. Stuff's looking real used." He frowned, then shrugged. "Sure, whatever makes you happy." It would. Because what I didn't tell them was this: the name on the mortgage wasn't mine anymore. And the guy it belonged to was changing the locks next week. The next morning, I left early. Didn't even make coffee. Just grabbed my keys, stepped over my dad's shoes in the hallway, which he'd left dead center like he was marking territory, and walked out the door before my mother could ask if I wanted to pick up eggs on the way home. Spoiler, I didn't. I drove around the block twice, just to shake off the rage. I wasn't even mad. Not in the yell and break things way. This was deeper. That cold, still kind of anger that hums like a car engine left running in neutral. By 9 a.m., I was sipping gas station coffee and sitting in front of my lawyer's office. Yeah, my lawyer. Something I got when I bought the house. It was part of a deal I made with a real estate investor I used to detail cars for. We'll get to him later, but let's just say I knew how to protect myself long before my parents thought I could own a broom, let alone a deed. The office door opened. Kevin, mid-40s, looks like he moonlights as a chess champion and a bass player, motioned me in. You were right, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. They've been listing your address as their own on multiple forms. Utility signups, voter registration. Your dad even changed his driver's license address. Wait, what? I blinked. Kevin tapped the copy. Got a DMV change from 2 weeks ago. He used your house as proof of residence. I stared at the paperwork. There it was, plain as day. My home address. His name. Unbelievable. The man had literally claimed residence in a place he didn't pay a penny for, like it was a social media status update. Kevin raised an eyebrow. Want to proceed with the action? I didn't hesitate. Do it. He smiled. Consider it done. Lock change notice is already filed. Official transfer hits Monday. See, here's the twist. The house technically wasn't in my name anymore. Not directly. I'd sold it to a trust one controlled. Long story short, I used it as leverage to finance my next move, buying a small commercial garage where I could finally open my own custom upholstery and interior shop. The house was still mine in every practical way, but on paper, it belonged to the trust. And the trust had no legal obligation to house unwanted freeloaders who never even showed up when I graduated trade school. I left Kevin's office feeling lighter than I had in days. That afternoon, I returned home with groceries I didn't plan to share. As soon as I walked in, I was hit with the smell of burning eggs and entitlement. Mom was in the kitchen, experimenting with my stove like it was some vintage toy she just discovered. Oh, good, she chirped. I used your eggs. We were out. Right, I said flatly, staring at the mess. You mean my only eggs? She laughed like I'd told a joke. Well, add it to the family expense chart. There was a chart now. Dad appeared from the hallway holding my old speaker. This thing still work? Natalie wants to use it for her dance class videos. I took a deep breath and smiled. You know what? Let her. They both paused, confused by how calm I was. Really? Mom asked. Sure, I said. But you might want to ask the new owner first. She tilted her head. New owner? Yeah, I said casually, unpacking the groceries. House was transferred into a trust a while ago. I'm just the occupant now. She blinked. What does that mean? It means, I said, grabbing a soda, that legally speaking, none of you live here. And come Monday, the locks change. Trust policy. Security update. I watched it land. It didn't hit Dad right away. But Mom? She went pale, like someone just unplugged her. That's not funny, she said quickly. You wouldn't do that. I shrugged. You're right. I wouldn't. But the trust has rules. Rules, she repeated, like it was a foreign word. Yep, I said, cracking open the soda. Like no unregistered occupants, no unpaid guests, and definitely no family charts written in glitter pen on the fridge. She ran into the living room, flipping through the folder I left earlier. Her voice shot up an octave. You really filed this? I sipped. Page 2 is the best part. Because page 2, that's where it listed them both, parents and Natalie, as unauthorized squatters, subject to immediate removal once the lock change was complete. And that was just the beginning. Saturday afternoon hit like a sitcom rerun I didn't ask to watch. The door flung open mid-scroll through my phone, and in she came. Natalie, my sister. The reason I grew up in the background of someone else's spotlight. She looked exactly the same, over-accessorized, underemployed, and somehow still convinced the world owed her a standing ovation for existing. Finally, she said, stepping in with shopping bags like she was arriving at her personal penthouse. I had to Uber. Why isn't the family car here? Family car? I repeated. She looked up from her phone. The silver one. Mom said we could swap it between houses. Dad promised to fix the brakes. I just smiled and pointed to the driveway. You mean the one that was towed this morning for being unregistered and parked in a loading zone? That one? Her face froze. You're joking. Oh, yeah, I said dryly. Because I love calling impound lots on my Saturdays. Natalie dropped her bags with a thud and looked around, like something felt off. She clocked the tension immediately. Mom pacing in the hallway. Dad fake scrolling on his tablet like a teenage boy caught sneaking out. What's going on? She asked. I took a long sip from my soda and gestured toward the fridge, where I'd taped the lock change notice. Big. Bold. Laminated. She blinked at it, then read the top line aloud. Notice of security update. Occupants must vacate by Monday at 10 a.m. Natalie turned slowly. Is this some kind of prank? Nope, I said, standing. It's real. And I'd get your ring light out of my guest room before it ends up in a donation box. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. You can't kick us out, she finally said, trying to laugh. This is your house. Nope, I replied. Not anymore. It belongs to the trust. She rolled her eyes. Okay. And what? You're the trust? No, I said, grinning. But I know the guy who runs it. Real stickler for rules. Mom stepped in, arms folded. Mason, this is ridiculous. You're tearing the family apart over a few misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I repeated. You moved into my home without asking, changed addresses, ate all my groceries, called it a family property like that means anything in court. Natalie literally unpacked her fake diploma on my nightstand. Natalie gasped. It's not fake. I raised an eyebrow. It's printed in Comic Sans. She went quiet. Dad finally spoke up. Look, maybe things got a little messy, but we can talk it through. We're family. Yeah, I said, nodding. That's exactly why you're getting 2 extra days. Natalie scoffed. You're serious? You'd really kick out your own parents? Your sister? I walked over to the dining table and flipped open the binder. Want to see the clause where you all signed away that possibility? Here, page 3, subsection D. You initialed it, Natalie. When you used my Wi-Fi last month and accepted the terms. She frowned. Wait, what? Oh, I forgot to mention I added the guest Wi-Fi. That wasn't just internet. It was a digital acknowledgement form. Her eyes widened. You tricked me into agreeing to terms and conditions? I nodded. Welcome to adulthood. Mom looked like she might actually faint. Natalie, finally realizing I wasn't bluffing, started grabbing her things in a huff. This is petty, she muttered. You've always been bitter. Nope, I said. Just quiet. There's a difference. She stormed down the hallway. Mom followed, shooting me a death glare over her shoulder. You're going to regret this, Mason. I gave her the same polite smile she used on me every Christmas when she handed me a $5 Starbucks card and gave Natalie a weekend spa voucher. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll regret it in peace, in a house that's actually mine. She opened her mouth to argue, and that's when the doorbell rang. Dad looked confused. You expecting someone? Nope, I said. I already knew who it was. And so did Kevin, the lawyer, who stepped into the doorway holding a briefcase and a folder labeled Eviction Enforcement, Private Property. Kevin stepped inside like a man who didn't believe in small talk. He was dressed sharper than usual, navy blazer, polished boots, folder tucked under one arm like a loaded weapon. The minute he stepped onto the rug, Natalie squawked. "Who is this?" "Relax," I said. "He's not a hitman." Kevin gave her a tight smile. "But I do enforce legal property claims." "Afternoon, Miss Natalie." She blinked. "How do you know my name?" "You accepted the terms and conditions on the guest Wi-Fi," he said without missing a beat. "I read fast." Dad narrowed his eyes. "What's this about?" "You already made your little point, Mason. You don't need to drag outsiders in." "Outsiders?" Kevin said calmly, setting his briefcase on the table. "Sir, I represent the legal entity that owns this home. Your son no longer holds the deed. He is, for all legal purposes, a tenant with authority to manage occupancy." Dad looked stunned. "But he bought this house." Kevin nodded. "He did. Then sold it to a trust and retained management rights. That trust has rules. One of which is no unauthorized occupants." Mom's voice cracked. "We're his parents." Kevin flipped a page. "Not listed. Not registered. And last I checked, this is an 1832. Family blood doesn't override a notarized contract." Natalie's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." Kevin turned to her, calm as ever. "You especially, Miss Natalie, violated Section 5, entering the property without express written consent. And Section 9, attempting to reassign private property for personal gain." "I was studying," she snapped. "You turned the guest room into a selfie studio." Dad threw up his hands. Okay. Maybe we overstepped, but can't we work something out?" "Already have," I said. "You've got until Monday." Kevin slid a folder across the table toward my dad. "This outlines the timeline, your rights, and instructions for peacefully vacating the premises." Mom picked it up, flipping through frantically. "There has to be a loophole. He's our son." Kevin raised a brow. "And he's exercising his right to boundary enforcement." Natalie leaned against the doorframe like a movie villain. "This is just because you were jealous. All those years you were quiet, bitter, hiding in the garage. Now you're pulling strings like you're some kind of mastermind." I shrugged. "You're not wrong." That made her pause. Kevin packed his papers, then looked around the room like a school principal surveying a detention hall. "I suggest you all start packing now. And don't forget your charger, Miss Natalie. The trust repossesses any left-behind electronics." She hissed. "This is insane." Mom turned to me, tear-eyed now. "Mason, please. Be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I repeated. "Where was that when you handed my childhood room to your daughter's boyfriend because he was staying over a lot anyway? Where was it," I continued, "when I was 16 and got left behind on a family trip because I took too long to pack?" Dad looked down at the floor. "Funny how I was never part of the family until I had something you wanted." Kevin stood up. "We're done here. Enjoy the weekend. I'll be back Monday with the locksmith." Natalie muttered, "We should have just taken his car like last time." Everyone froze. Kevin slowly turned. "What did you say?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" Natalie's face flushed. "Nothing. Just a joke." Mom cleared her throat. "Let's start packing, shall we?" Kevin gave me a nod and left. I followed him to the door. "Still want me to file the small claims theft paperwork?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, then smiled. "Let's give them the weekend first." "Because Monday?" "Monday would be fun." By Sunday morning, the house felt like a pressure cooker with no steam valve. Every drawer had been yanked open. Bags sat half-zipped in the hallway. Natalie's designer knockoff duffel was stuffed to bursting with half-folded outfits, chargers, and 3 kinds of hair extensions. Dad had posted up in the kitchen, nursing lukewarm coffee like a man waiting for a miracle. Mom paced from room to room, muttering to herself, occasionally stopping to sigh dramatically, as if volume could reverse legal ownership. And me? I sat outside on the porch in a camp chair, with a book I wasn't reading and noise-canceling headphones I wasn't using. Just watching. The flamingo lawn ornament, Gary too, stood beside me proudly. Unlike the last one, this version was zip-tied to the porch rail. Lesson learned. Inside, it was chaos. Natalie tried calling every relative we had. I know, because I heard her shouting things like, "Mason's gone rogue. He's evicting us like we're strangers." Yes, he's serious. No, it's not drugs. It's worse. He's organized. She even called Aunt Dana, who replied loud enough for me to hear through the wall, "Didn't y'all leave him at the bus station that one Christmas? Maybe zip it and start packing." God bless. Good old Aunt Dana. Mom eventually cornered me by the porch door with a guilt trip straight from the archives. "We're your parents," she said softly. "We gave you everything." I looked up. "You gave me a trash bag full of clothes and a bill for the broken washing machine. That was your contribution." She snapped. "You lived here rent-free for years." I raised an eyebrow. "I was 14, and I fixed the fence twice." "We were trying our best," she said. "No," I replied. "You were trying your best with Natalie. The rest of us were just in the background." She blinked. "You want the truth?" I asked, standing up. "You didn't raise a family. You raised a golden child and 2 emotional support NPCs. I just happened to uninstall myself." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad peeked out the window. "What's the point of all this, Mason? Revenge? You think kicking us out will fix anything?" I shrugged. "Nope. It won't fix the past. But it'll fix the locks." Natalie tried a new tactic after lunch. Weaponized pity. She popped down across from me on the porch, fake crying into a tissue that still had a Walgreens sticker on it. "You really think this is what success looks like? A lone bidder ruining your family?" "Success," I said, "is having options. And I finally have them." She sniffed. "You've always been like this. Cold. Distant. Funny," I replied. "That's what being ignored for 20 years will do to you." She tried one last Hail Mary. "Dad's blood pressure is up. Mom's been crying for hours. You really want to send them packing in that state?" I leaned forward. "You think this is sudden?" I asked. "You just moved in." "I've been packing my feelings since I was a kid. I was ready for this 10 years ago." Her jaw tightened. "Besides," I added, "you've all got places to go." "Like where?" she snapped. "Dad changed his license to this address. Remember? DMV is going to love that little mistake." She paled. "And your boyfriend?" I continued. "Didn't he just move into that shiny new rental with 2 bedrooms and a Peloton?" She stood. "You've always hated me." "No," I said quietly. "I just finally stopped pretending I didn't." That night, Mom made one last plea. She knocked gently on my door. Yes, my door. Because I'd reclaimed the master bedroom like a civilized tyrant. "Just sleep on it," she whispered. "I plan to," I said, with both eyes closed for once. And I did. While they packed like fugitives from common sense, I slept like a man who finally stopped carrying the weight of a family that never cared if he collapsed. Monday morning arrived like a court summons with espresso. I was already up when Kevin's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out holding the same gray folder, but this time accompanied by a short guy in work boots and a belt full of tools. "Morning," Kevin said. "This is Luis. He's here for the locks." Luis gave a polite nod. "Shouldn't take more than 45 minutes. You got different keys?" I held up a new ring. "Fresh cut yesterday." He smiled. "Nice. Let's get started." The sound of tools scraping against the front door deadbolt was apparently louder than expected, because Dad came barreling out of the hallway in his robe. "What the hell is going on?" Luis kept working, completely unfazed. Kevin didn't even flinch. "Lock change," I said, sipping my coffee. "Trust protocol. You've had 72 hours. Mom appeared next, looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was a mess, and her voice cracked from shouting I hadn't heard. You can't just change the locks with us still here. Kevin calmly pulled a paper from his folder. Legally, we can. But we're giving you until the locksmith finishes. As a courtesy. Dad turned to me. You're seriously doing this after everything we've done? After everything you've taken, I corrected. Natalie stormed out next, dragging a suitcase that looked heavier than her life choices. This is abuse, she hissed. You're throwing your family into the street. Kevin handed her a second envelope. Actually, this includes referrals to short-term rentals, moving assistance, and, generously, a small relocation voucher funded by the trust. She ripped it in half and let the pieces flutter to the floor. I don't want your fake charity. Good, I said, because it wasn't for you. It was for Mom and Dad. Natalie froze. Mom clutched her chest like I'd physically struck her. You're turning us against each other now. I gave her a long, tired look. No. You did that when you decided I was disposable until I owned real estate. Dad stepped forward. We were going to include you eventually. Sure, I said, right after Natalie became a licensed realtor and started selling my guest room. That shut him up. Luis called out. Deadbolts changed. Kevin nodded. That means, legally, we can begin reclaiming the space. Natalie looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. What happened to you? You did, I said, over and over. And I let you. Until now. She grabbed her bags and stomped out, slamming the door behind her. Mom turned to me. We raised you better than this. No, I said. You raised me to never ask questions. To stay out of the way. To be grateful for scraps. Luis moved to the back door. Dad tried one last desperate move. This isn't how family works. I tilted my head. Then maybe you should have tried acting like one. Kevin handed me the final copy of the notice. It's official. You're clear. Then he paused. There's one more thing, he said, pulling out a small envelope. Certified mail arrived for you Saturday, addressed to the trust. I opened it and instantly recognized the handwriting. It was from Grandpa. A handwritten letter, postmarked a month before he passed. Inside was a short note, Mason, if they ever try to take what you've earned, remember, you never needed their permission. You just needed the deed. And your name on it. I folded the letter slowly. Mom saw it. Is that from him? I nodded. She stepped closer. What does it say? I looked at her, really looked, then handed it to Kevin instead. He read it, tucked it away, and said simply, final occupancy revoked. You're no longer welcome here. And with that, the locksmith finished the last door. The house was quiet again. Not the stiff, empty kind of quiet. The good kind. The kind that sits in the corners like an old friend. The kind you earn. Natalie's ring light was gone. Her leftover iced coffee still sat on the counter, untouched. Dad's shoes weren't in the hallway. Mom's fridge chart was in the trash. I walked barefoot through my own house, actually mine again. And it hit me just how much tension I'd been holding for years. Like my body had built muscle just from dodging their expectations. I didn't celebrate, didn't pop champagne. I just opened a window, let the breeze in, and exhaled. 2 days passed with radio silence. Then on Wednesday, an envelope showed up. No stamp, just shoved through the mailbox. Messy handwriting on the front. Inside, a torn photo, one I didn't even know existed. It was from when I was 12, standing in the background while Natalie blew out birthday candles on a cake with my name written in the corner, crossed out. There was a sticky note attached. We made mistakes, but you didn't have to be so cruel. No signature. But the handwriting? Mom's. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I folded it carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and filed it under "not my responsibility." That weekend, I finally invited people over. Not family, not blood. Friends. My people. A few guys from trade school. My shop partner, who once lent me a wrench and never asked for it back. Kevin showed up late with ribs and a Bluetooth speaker, then passed out in a patio chair after 2 beers. We grilled, played music, laughed too loud. And at one point, someone asked, "So, how's the family?" I paused, thought about all the years of silence, disappointment, guilt-tripping, and golden child favoritism. Then smiled, and said, "Quiet." That was it. Because I didn't need to burn bridges. I just stopped crossing them. The next week, I signed the final paperwork on my new commercial space. A 2-bay garage with an office upstairs, a loft, and enough room to finally take on full upholstery jobs. I named it Torque and Thread. Guess what? Same trust owns the land. Same new locks. Same rules. No Natalie. No parental drama. Just peace, fabric, and tools that actually listened when I used them. Weeks later, I saw Mom posted something on Facebook. Some people forget who raised them. So I posted a photo of my shop opening. Caption, some people didn't. No tags, no names. But the comment section blew up. Aunt Dana sent 3 flame emojis. My old classmate wrote, "Let me know if y'all do car seats." And one message popped up from a guy I hadn't seen in years. "Is that the same house your parents tried to take over?" I didn't respond. Just reacted with a key emoji. Because some stories don't need retelling. Just good locks. And better boundaries. Have you ever felt like you were just a background character in your own family? Or maybe someone tried to claim something you worked hard for? I'd love to hear how you found your voice and stood your ground. Share your stories, your triumphs, or even just your frustrations in the comments below. Let's talk about it.